I have a confession to make. I love libraries. When I first moved to Newmarket, one of the first things I did was actually get a library card. This was before I had a postal codes, before I had signed up for Hydro or Bell or any of that. Something about the smell of books in that building there is just a ton of stories. In fact, Newmarket Alliance Church used to meet in this building, if you can believe it. I love that it's free. Love that there's movies I can get out. I mostly get nonfiction books, probably 95% nonfiction. But how do you speak of something that can't even be articulated? Our language can't even contain the beauty and the nuance and the truth behind it. The greatest teacher who ever lived, the greatest communicator who ever lived, he primarily spoke in story, in parable. He knew that life-transforming truth isn't expressed in some logical discourse, some TED Talk. Our religious world is just chock full of books and sermons that are designed to make faith concise and palatable. I do that. See, Jesus' parables, his stories, they subvert that desire to make faith into like 5 easy steps. They don't offer clarity sometimes. They refuse to be pigeonholed. In fact, they demand that we keep returning to his words, chewing on them, wrestling on them, finding new layers each time. It's more the language of the artist, poet, more so than the language of an instruction manual. See, his parables don't primarily provide information about the world, but if we allow them to do their work in us, it will change our world. Like, take for instance the parable of the prodigal son, which actually should be called the parable of the generous father, the forgiving father. In just a few words, just a few sentences, there's this gut-wrenching story of two sons, both who are separated from their father, one because of his bad deeds, one ironically because of his good deeds, and both are welcomed home. The one has left and realized what he's missing. The other has stayed and doesn't seem to understand what he's had all along. And both are loved and invited to come home. It's a story about exile, about all the ways that we wander from the love that's been there for us the whole time, looking for our worth and our value in all kinds of things, when it turns out we have been a child of a loving father the whole time. See, the problem with so much religious communication is that it aims at changing our mind. And the result is that we end up hearing the message of the preacher without necessarily heeding the message. We can listen to the truth and agree with it and yet not change at all in our response to it. For instance, I bet all of us have been in a conversation with people. It goes something like this. Somebody brings up the topic of how wealth, accumulating stuff, doesn't actually bring happiness. And then we say, working all the hours that God has given us isn't actually good for us. And then we say, owning the bigger and the best isn't actually maybe good for our soul and even for the planet. And then after that conversation, we can turn around and act as if we believed the opposite. Jesus' parables represent a mode of communicating that cannot be heard unless they're heeded. In the words of the greatest storyteller who ever lived, the parable can only be heard by those with ears to hear. Join us this summer for a series on the stories that Jesus told. Every week, a new parable that will challenge and encourage and maybe just transform.